If a billionaire offered you $1 million for one night, would you say yes? Maya Chen thought she knew her answer until her 6-year-old daughter's life hung in the balance. When 23-year-old Maya's hands trembled as she massaged the shoulders of billionaire CEO Alexander Stone, she never imagined he'd slip her a check for $1 million with a single condition: spend one night with him. But what this desperate single mother discovered in his penthouse suite wasn't what she expected. His secret would shatter everything she thought she knew about power, money, and the man who held her family's fate in his hands. What would you do for $1 million? Keep reading to find out what Maya chose, because this story will leave you questioning everything you think you know about the wealthy and powerful. Maya's alarm screamed at 4:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 3 years. Her cramped studio apartment in Queens felt even smaller in the pre-dawn darkness, with Emma's tiny bed pushed against the opposite wall. Her daughter's peaceful face was the only beautiful thing in their shabby world, until Maya noticed the bluish tint around Emma's lips that sent ice through her veins. She worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat: hotel masseur by day, diner waitress by night, and online tutoring sessions until her eyes burned at 2 a.m. Her hands were cracked and bleeding from the constant work, but she never complained. How could she, when Emma would look up with those bright eyes and ask, "Mommy, why don't we have a Christmas tree like the other kids at school?" The medical bills had already devoured Maya's savings, her husband's life insurance, and every favor she could call in. David had died serving in Afghanistan when Emma was just 2, leaving behind a hole in their hearts and a mountain of debt that seemed to grow every month. The wedding ring Maya wore on a chain around her neck was the only valuable thing she had left, but she'd rather starve than sell David's memory. That Tuesday morning started like any other, until Maya's phone buzzed with a text that made her stomach drop. Final notice: Emma Chen surgery payment required within 14 days, or procedure will be canceled. St. Mary's Children's Hospital. $200,000. The number haunted Maya as she took the subway into Manhattan, heading to her job at the luxury Meridian Hotel. Emma needed heart surgery, a complex procedure that could save her life or leave them bankrupt if Maya couldn't find the money. The little girl had been born with a rare heart defect that was getting worse, and Maya watched helplessly as her baby grew weaker each day. The hotel's spa was a different world from Maya's reality. Rich women draped in diamonds complained about their mild headaches, while Maya's hands worked magic on their pampered bodies. She was good at her job, maybe too good, because word had spread among New York's elite about the young masseur with healing hands. That's how she ended up in the penthouse office of Alexander Stone. Maya had heard whispers about him in the hotel hallways. 35 years old, devastatingly handsome, and worth more money than some small countries. The tabloids called him a heartless playboy who collected women like expensive watches, discarding them just as easily. But Maya didn't read gossip magazines. She was too busy trying to survive. His office was intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, furniture that probably cost more than Maya's annual rent, and an aura of power that made the air feel thick. Alexander Stone sat behind his massive desk, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders in a voice that could cut glass. "You're late," he said without looking up as Maya set up her portable massage table. Maya's cheeks burned. The subway had broken down, making her 15 minutes behind schedule. "I'm sorry, Mr. Stone. It won't happen again." He finally looked at her then, and Maya felt her breath catch. Alexander Stone was even more striking in person: sharp cheekbones, piercing gray eyes, and an expression that suggested he'd never experienced a moment of uncertainty in his privileged life. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, and his custom suit probably cost more than Maya made in 6 months. "It better not," he said, loosening his tie. "I have a conference call with Tokyo in an hour." Maya worked in silence, her skilled hands finding the knots of tension in his shoulders and neck. She'd massaged dozens of wealthy clients, but something about Alexander Stone felt different. Beneath the expensive cologne and designer clothes, she sensed something wounded. Her professional instincts kicked in, and she found herself working with extra care, trying to ease whatever burden he carried. That's when her phone buzzed. The text message from Emma's school made Maya's hands shake. "Emma fainted during recess. Please come immediately." Maya's face went white, and she stepped back from the table, mumbling apologies. "Problem?" Alexander's voice was cold, businesslike. Maya's throat closed up. She couldn't afford to lose this job, but Emma came first, always. "My daughter, she's sick. I have to—" "How sick?" The question surprised her. Most of her wealthy clients treated her like furniture, barely acknowledging her existence beyond the service she provided. Maya met his gray eyes and saw something unexpected there. Genuine concern, not mere curiosity. "Heart defect," Maya whispered. "She needs surgery, but Her voice broke. "I can't afford it." Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His eyes flicked to the chain around Maya's neck where David's wedding ring caught the light. "Your husband doesn't take care of you?" The question hit like a physical blow. Maya's hand instinctively went to the ring, her anchor in the storm of their financial struggles. "He died serving our country in Afghanistan. Cancer took our savings. My daughter needs surgery that costs $200,000, and I have 14 days to find the money or she—" Maya couldn't finish the sentence. Something shifted in Alexander's expression, but it was gone so quickly Maya wondered if she'd imagined it. He stood abruptly, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. "We're done here." Maya packed her equipment with shaking hands, humiliated by her outburst. Rich people didn't want to hear about poor people's problems. That's not why they paid for spa services. But as she headed for the door, Alexander's voice stopped her. "Leave your contact information with my assistant." Maya turned back, confused. "Sir?" "For future appointments." His tone was neutral, giving nothing away. Then he did something that left Maya speechless. He pulled out his wallet and handed her $500. "For your daughter." Maya stared at the money in shock. $500 was more than she made in a week at the hotel. Her pride warred with her desperation, but Emma's face flashed in her mind, pale, tired, struggling to breathe. She took the money with trembling fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. Alexander had already turned back to his desk, dismissing her once again. But as Maya waited for the elevator, she caught a glimpse of him through the glass walls of his office. He was standing at the window, watching her reflection in the glass, and the expression on his face was nothing like the cold businessman she'd just encountered. Type heart, if you're already feeling for Maya, because this is just the beginning of a story that will change how you see both wealth and poverty forever. Over the next 2 weeks, Alexander Stone specifically requested Maya for 3 more massage sessions. Each time he remained distant and professional, but the tips grew larger, $1,000 here, $1,500 there. Maya should have been grateful, but something about his behavior unsettled her. Why her? He could afford any spa in the city, any masseur with better credentials and fancier equipment. She started noticing small details. Alexander never took phone calls during their sessions, which his assistant mentioned was unprecedented for a man who normally conducted business around the clock. His shoulders carried a tension that went deeper than work stress, and sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she caught him studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The money Alexander gave her helped with Emma's immediate medical needs, but it barely dented the surgery costs. Maya found herself making desperate calls to loan sharks who quoted interest rates that would enslave her for decades. She even considered selling David's ring, but couldn't bring herself to let go of the last piece of her husband. Emma's condition worsened daily. The little girl who once ran around their tiny apartment now spent most afternoons lying on the couch, too tired to play. Her lips stayed a frightening shade of blue, and her breathing grew more labored. Maya watched helplessly as her daughter faded before her eyes. That's when everything changed. Maya was sitting in the hospital hallway after another consultation with Emma's cardiologist when Alexander Stone appeared like a ghost from her nightmares. He wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of his usual suit, making him look younger and somehow more dangerous. "How did you know I was here?" Maya asked, too exhausted to be surprised. Instead of answering, Alexander sat beside her on the uncomfortable plastic chair. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to her without a word. Maya unfolded it and nearly fainted. It was a check for $1 million, made out to her name. "What is this?" she whispered. Alexander's voice was carefully neutral. "The solution to your problem." Maya stared at the check, her mind struggling to process the number of zeros. $1 million would save Emma's life and secure their future forever. But nothing came free in this world, especially not from men like Alexander Stone. "What do you want?" she asked, though she was afraid she already knew. Alexander met her eyes directly. "One night. Spend one night with me." The words hit Maya like a physical slap. She shot to her feet, the check fluttering to the floor between them. "You're sick." "Your daughter has 12 days, Alexander said calmly, not even flinching when Maya's hand connected with his cheek. The sound of the slap echoed in the empty hallway. "Think about it." He stood, straightened his sweater, and walked away without looking back. The check lay on the linoleum floor like a serpent, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Maya stared at that piece of paper for 3 days. It sat on her nightstand like a devil's contract, taunting her every time she looked at Emma's increasingly pale face. Her sister begged her not to even consider it, but what choice did she have? Let her daughter die to preserve her dignity? She researched Alexander Stone obsessively, reading every article and gossip column she could find. The picture they painted was ugly, a man who used his wealth to buy whatever he wanted, including women. He'd been linked to dozens of models and socialites, none lasting more than a few months. The tabloids called him heartless, manipulative, a predator in expensive suits. But Maya remembered the way his jaw had tightened when she mentioned Afghanistan, the unexpected gentleness in his voice when he'd asked about Emma, the look on his face as he watched her leave his office. Maybe she was fooling herself. Maybe desperation was making her see kindness where none existed. But Emma's breathing grew shallower each day, and the check represented their only hope. At 2 a.m. on Friday night, Maya dialed Alexander's private number with shaking fingers. "I'll do it," she whispered when he answered on the first ring. "But I have conditions." "Name them." His immediate response told Maya he'd been expecting her call. The realization made her stomach turn, but she pressed on. "One night only. No cameras, no recordings, no one else knows, and you pay for Emma's surgery first." "Done. Saturday night. I'll send a car at 7. The line went dead, leaving Maya alone with her decision and the crushing weight of what she'd just agreed to do. What do you think Maya is walking into? Is Alexander just another rich predator using his wealth to exploit desperate women? Or is there more to this story than meets the eye? Saturday arrived like a death sentence. Alexander's people descended on Maya's apartment like a professional army. Stylists, makeup artists, someone who claimed to be a wardrobe consultant. They transformed her cramped studio into a makeshift salon, bringing designer dresses and jewelry worth more than Maya's apartment. The neighbors watched through their windows as luxury cars lined up outside her building. Maya caught Mrs. Rodriguez from 3B whispering to her friend about that young mother selling herself to rich men. The judgment in their eyes burned, but Maya held her head high. They didn't understand. They couldn't. Emma watched the transformation with wide eyes, asking innocent questions that broke Maya's heart. "Are you going to marry a prince, Mommy? Will we live in a castle?" Maya knelt down to Emma's level, smoothing her daughter's dark hair. "I'm just going to a fancy party, baby. But tomorrow, we're going to make sure you get better." okay?" The little girl nodded solemnly, then whispered, "Daddy would want you to be happy, Mommy." The words nearly destroyed Maya's composure. David would be horrified by what she was about to do, but he would also understand. Their daughter's life came first. It had to. The dress Alexander's people chose was elegant but conservative, midnight blue silk that hugged Maya's figure without being provocative. The jewelry was understated but clearly expensive. Maya hardly recognized herself in the mirror, transformed from a struggling single mother into someone who belonged in Alexander's world. The car that came for her was a simple black sedan, not the flashy limousine she'd expected. The driver was professional and courteous, treating her like a respected guest rather than purchased goods. Maya tried to find comfort in these small details, but her hands still shook during the entire ride to Alexander's penthouse. She'd expected something out of a movie: velvet and gold, champagne and rose petals, the stereotypical rich man's seduction lair. Instead, Alexander's penthouse was surprisingly sparse. Clean lines, neutral colors, furniture that looked expensive but felt cold. The only luxury was the view, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering Manhattan skyline. Alexander met her at the door wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt, his feet bare. He looked younger without the armor of his business suits, more human somehow. But Maya couldn't let her guard down. This was still a transaction, no matter how he dressed it up. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Maya didn't respond. She couldn't trust her voice. Alexander led her to the kitchen, where something delicious was simmering on the stove. "I hope you're hungry. I made dinner." "You cook?" The question slipped out before Maya could stop it. A ghost of a smile crossed Alexander's lips. "Surprised?" "I'm full of surprises, Maya." The way he said her name made something flutter in her chest. Not fear, but something more dangerous. Recognition. As if he'd been saying her name long before they met. As Alexander moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, Maya noticed details that didn't fit the Playboy image. Medical textbooks stacked on the counter. A framed photo on the mantelpiece showing a younger Alexander in military fatigues, arms around soldiers she didn't recognize. Wait, was that a Purple Heart on the shelf? "You served?" Maya asked, pointing to the military photo. Alexander's hands stilled over the pasta he was plating. "Afghanistan, 3 tours." The word hit Maya like a lightning bolt. "My husband served there too, Captain David Chen, 82nd Airborne." Alexander's fork clattered to the floor. When he looked up, his face had gone completely white. "David Chen? You knew him?" Maya's heart started racing. "You knew my David?" Alexander gripped the counter as if he might fall. His voice came out as barely a whisper. "David saved my life." The world tilted sideways. Maya stared at this man she'd thought was a stranger, a predator, and saw something that changed everything. Pain, guilt, recognition. "He pulled me and 3 other soldiers out of a Humvee after an IED explosion," Alexander continued, his voice growing stronger. "Went back for the driver even though the whole thing was about to blow. That's when the second device went off." Maya's knees gave out. She sank into a chair, memories of David's funeral flooding back, the folded flag, the condolences from fellow soldiers, the hollow ache of knowing he'd died a hero while she was left to raise their daughter alone. "I've been looking for his family for 7 years, Alexander said. "The military records were classified, and I only had his name and unit. When you said Afghanistan, when you showed me his ring," he ran his hands through his hair, "I knew it had to be you." Maya's world was spinning. "The massage appointments, the money. You've been taking care of David's family, like I promised him I would." Alexander sat across from her, his gray eyes intense. "He talked about you and Emma constantly, showed me pictures until I had them memorized. He made me swear that if something happened to him, I'd find you and make sure you were okay." The enormity of what Alexander was saying crashed over Maya like a wave. The hospital bills, the payment plans they offered me, that was you? Alexander nodded. I've been covering Emma's medical expenses for months, but it had to be done anonymously. Direct charity would have wounded your pride, and David told me how stubborn you were. Maya thought about all the times the hospital had mysteriously found funds available for Emma's treatments, the payment plans that seemed too good to be true, the specialist consultations that were suddenly covered by insurance. Alexander had been their guardian angel, working behind the scenes to keep Emma alive. But the check, Maya said, her voice breaking. The night together. Why make me think I was selling myself to you? Alexander's face crumpled. Because I'm dying, Maya. The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. I have the same heart condition as Emma, Alexander continued. It's genetic, but in adults, it's usually fatal. I have maybe 6 months left, and I've spent the last 5 years trying to find a way to help kids like her. All my money, all my resources. It's going to pediatric heart research. Maya stared at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not a predator or a heartless billionaire, but a dying man trying to keep a promise to a fallen soldier. The $1 million isn't payment for sex, Alexander said quietly. It's David's death benefit. There was bureaucratic red tape, funds tied up in military investigations. I used my connections to recover what should have been yours years ago. But legally, I couldn't just give it to you directly without raising questions. Maya felt like she was drowning. So you made me think, you let me believe that I was using you. Alexander's voice was filled with regret. I thought if we spent one evening together, I could explain properly. Show you David's letters, the photos he gave me, the promise I made. But then you looked at me with such disgust, and I realized how it must have seemed. Maya stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You humiliated me. You made me hate myself. Made me think I was prostituting myself to save my daughter. I know. Alexander didn't try to defend himself. I handled it all wrong. I've never been good with people, Maya. I've spent so long building walls, being the cold businessman everyone expects, that I forgot how to be human. Maya paced the length of his kitchen, anger and confusion warring in her chest. You could have just told me the truth. Would you have believed me? A strange rich man claiming to know your dead husband, offering you money with no strings attached? Alexander's laugh was bitter. You would have thought I was lying, or crazy, or both. Maya wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She would have been suspicious of any wealthy stranger offering help without explanation. Trust didn't come easily when you'd been struggling alone for so long. I was trying to protect myself too, Alexander admitted. David talked about you so much that when I finally found you, when I saw you with Emma, I was already half in love with the idea of your family. But I'm dying, Maya. What right do I have to fall in love when I'll just leave you behind again? The raw honesty in his voice stopped Maya's pacing. She looked at this man who'd been watching over them from the shadows, keeping Emma alive, honoring a promise to a soldier who'd saved his life. Her anger began to transform into something more complicated. Just then, Alexander's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It's the hospital. Maya's blood turned to ice. Emma? Alexander answered on speaker. The doctor's voice was tense, professional. Mr. Stone, we need you and Mrs. Chen here immediately. Emma's condition has deteriorated rapidly. We need to operate tonight. Maya's legs gave out completely. Alexander caught her as she collapsed, his strong arms the only thing keeping her upright. We'll be right there, he told the doctor, then hung up and looked into Maya's terrified eyes. It's going to be okay. I promise. But as they raced through the Manhattan streets in Alexander's car, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. What do you think happens next? Will Emma survive the emergency surgery? And how will Maya ever forgive Alexander for the deception that brought them together? The hospital's emergency wing was a nightmare of bright lights and urgent voices. Maya ran through the corridors in her evening gown and heels, not caring how ridiculous she looked, with Alexander close behind her. Emma had been rushed into surgery, and the cardiac team was already prepping her tiny body for the operation that would either save her life or— Maya couldn't finish that thought. "I need to scrub in," Alexander told the head nurse, his voice taking on a tone of absolute authority that Maya had never heard before. "Sir, you can't just—" Alexander pulled out his wallet and flashed some kind of medical identification. "Dr. Alexander Stone, cardiac surgery. I trained at Johns Hopkins and I'm still licensed. That's my patient in there." Maya stared at him in shock. "You're a doctor?" "Was," Alexander corrected grimly, "before I inherited my father's business empire. But some things you never forget." The nurse looked between them, clearly recognizing Alexander as someone important enough not to question. "Dr. Martinez is leading the surgery, but we could use an extra pair of experienced hands." The child's heart stopped twice in the ambulance. Maya's world tilted. Emma's heart had stopped. Twice. Her baby girl was fighting for her life while Maya had been playing dress-up and uncovering family secrets. "Let me help her," Alexander said to Maya, his gray eyes intense. "Please, let me do what David would have done. Protect his family." Maya could only nod, tears streaming down her face. Alexander disappeared into the surgical suite, leaving her alone in the waiting room, still wearing the evening gown that now felt like a costume from another life. Through the observation window, Maya watched the most important surgery of her life unfold. Alexander moved with practiced precision, his hands steady despite his own failing heart. She could see him communicating with the surgical team, pointing to monitors, adjusting equipment. This wasn't the cold businessman or the mysterious benefactor. This was Dr. Alexander Stone, fighting to save a little girl's life. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Maya paced the waiting room in her heels until her feet bled, then kicked them off and continued barefoot. Other families came and went, but Maya remained frozen in time, watching the man she'd thought was a monster work to save her daughter. At 3 a.m., Alexander finally emerged from the operating room, still in scrubs, exhaustion written across his face. Maya searched his expression for any hint of Emma's fate. "She's alive," he said simply, and Maya collapsed into a chair, sobbing with relief. "The surgery was successful, but the next 24 hours are critical. She's strong, Maya, just like her father." Maya looked up at Alexander through her tears, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. His face was gray with exhaustion, and she noticed a slight tremor in his hands, the toll of performing delicate surgery when his own heart was failing. "You risked your life for her," Maya whispered. Alexander sat heavily beside her, pulling off his surgical cap. "She's David's daughter. That makes her family." Maya studied his profile. The sharp cheekbones, the exhausted eyes, the hands that had just saved her child's life. "Why didn't you tell me you were a doctor?" "Because I stopped being one when I took over Stone Industries," Alexander said quietly. "My father built a business empire, but he always said medicine was a waste of my potential. When he died, I had to choose between saving individual lives and using my inheritance to fund research that could save thousands." Maya began to understand the weight Alexander carried. He'd given up his calling to honor his father's legacy, using corporate profits to fund the medical research he could no longer conduct himself. The cold businessman persona wasn't who he really was. It was armor protecting the doctor who still lived underneath. "The children's hospital you're funding," Maya said. "How many kids have you helped?" Alexander's smile was tired, but genuine. "Emma will be number 848. The number hit Maya like a physical blow. 847 children whose lives Alexander had saved or improved, through his medical foundation. Kids whose families would never know the name of the man who'd given them hope. The tabloids, Maya said, remembering all the articles she'd read about his supposed romantic conquests. The Playboy reputation? Useful fiction, Alexander said. It keeps people from looking too closely at where my money really goes. If the public knew I was funding medical research instead of living the lifestyle they expect from a billionaire CEO, it would raise uncomfortable questions about other wealthy individuals who aren't using their fortunes for good. Maya felt her understanding of Alexander shift completely. The cold, distant man she'd met in his office was a carefully constructed facade. Underneath was someone who'd dedicated his life to honoring the memory of soldiers who'd saved him and children who needed saving. I owe you an apology, Maya said quietly. Alexander shook his head. You owe me nothing. I should have found a better way to help you. David told me you were proud, independent, that you'd rather starve than accept charity. I thought if I made it seem like a business transaction, you'd be more likely to accept help. Instead, you made me feel like a prostitute. Alexander winced. That was never my intention. I'm not good at this, Maya. I've spent so many years building walls, keeping people at a distance because getting close meant eventually losing them. David was the first real friend I'd had in years, and then he was gone. When I found you and Emma, I was terrified of caring too much. Maya saw the truth in his eyes. The loneliness, the fear, the guilt of a man who'd survived when his friend hadn't. Alexander Stone wasn't a heartless billionaire. He was just as broken as she was, trying to honor promises and save lives while his own slipped away. How long do you really have? Maya asked softly. Alexander was quiet for so long that Maya thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, My last cardiac evaluation showed significant deterioration. 6 months was optimistic. Maybe 3. The words settled between them like a bridge neither was ready to cross. Maya had spent years grieving one good man, and now she was faced with the possibility of losing another. But first, Emma had to survive the night. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Chen, your daughter is asking for you. Maya stood on shaking legs, then turned back to Alexander. Come with me? Alexander hesitated. Maya, I'm not... Emma should meet the man who saved her life, Maya said firmly. The man her father trusted. Together they walked into the pediatric ICU, where Emma lay surrounded by monitors and machines. Despite the tubes and wires, she looked peaceful, her lips finally showing healthy pink color instead of the frightening blue Maya had grown accustomed to. Emma's eyes fluttered open as they approached her bed. Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from the breathing tube, but her words were clear. Are you the nice doctor who held my hand? Alexander's composure cracked. He sat carefully beside Emma's bed, taking her tiny hand in his much larger one. I am. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Better, Emma said, then looked between Alexander and Maya with the uncanny perception of children. Mommy, are you going to marry Dr. Alex?
Maya's face turned red, but Alexander just smiled. The first genuine smile Maya had seen from him. What do you think, Emma? Should I ask your mommy to marry me? Emma giggled, a sound that was music to Maya's ears after weeks of labored breathing. Yes! Then we can be a real family. Maya's heart clenched, out of the mouths of babes. But could she trust Alexander? Could she risk loving someone who was going to leave them, just like David had? As if reading her thoughts, Alexander squeezed Emma's hand gently and said, Whatever happens, I promise I'll take care of both of you for as long as I can. Emma's eyes were already drifting closed again, but she whispered, Daddy told me in my dream that it was okay to love Dr. Alex. Maya's breath caught. Emma had never claimed to dream about David before, but as her daughter fell back into healing sleep, Maya wondered if maybe, just maybe, David was still looking out for them. Type tissue. If you're crying right now, because this story is about to take one more turn that will restore your faith in love, conquering all. 6 months later, Maya stood in the garden of Alexander's Connecticut estate, watching Emma chase butterflies through the flower beds. The little girl's laughter echoed across the manicured lawn, her heart now strong enough to support all the adventures a 7-year-old could dream up. Alexander knelt beside a patch of roses, patiently teaching Emma about soil composition and bloom cycles. His latest cardiac tests had shown something miraculous: improvement. The doctors called it unprecedented. Alexander called it the healing power of having something to live for. Maya touched her growing belly, still in the early stages of pregnancy, but unmistakably carrying new life. She hadn't told Alexander yet, wasn't sure how he'd react to the news that their unconventional family was about to grow by one more. The man who'd thought he had months to live was now talking about years, about watching Emma graduate high school, about building the children's hospital that would bear David's name. Love, it seemed, was indeed the best medicine. "Mommy!" Emma called out, running toward the house with dirt-stained knees and flower petals in her hair. "Dr. Alex says we can plant a garden for Daddy with his favorite flowers." Maya smiled, watching Alexander follow at a more sedate pace, his hand pressed briefly to his chest. The man who'd once hidden behind corporate armor now wore gardening clothes and dirt under his fingernails, completely transformed by the love of a family he'd never expected to have. "That sounds perfect, baby," Maya said, pulling Emma into a hug that smelled like sunshine and possibility. Alexander joined them on the porch, wrapping his arms around both Maya and Emma. For a moment, they stood together in perfect silence, 3 hearts beating in rhythm, proving that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones forged by loss, healed by love, and strengthened by second chances. "Maya," Alexander said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken words. She looked up at him, seeing the question in his eyes, the hope he was afraid to voice. "Yes?" "I love you," he said simply. "Both of you. Whatever time I have left, however long or short, I want to spend it being your family." Maya reached up to touch his face. This man who'd started as a stranger became a savior and was now her heart's home. "We love you too, Alexander, and about that time you have left." She placed his hand on her still flat belly, watching his eyes widen with understanding. Alexander's face went through a dozen emotions in the space of a heartbeat: shock, joy, terror, hope. "Are you sure?" Maya nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Apparently, we're going to need more time than the doctors predicted." Alexander kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promises for a future they were going to fight for together. When they broke apart, Emma was grinning at them with the satisfaction of a matchmaker whose plan had come together perfectly. "Can we name the baby David if it's a boy?" Emma asked seriously. Alexander and Maya exchanged a look over Emma's head, both remembering the soldier who'd brought them together across time and tragedy. "I think Daddy would like that," Maya said softly. As the sun set over their garden, Maya reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. A desperate mother, a dying billionaire, and a little girl's brave heart had somehow created something beautiful from the ashes of loss. It wasn't the fairy tale she'd dreamed of as a young bride, but it was real and complicated and worth fighting for. Alexander's latest medical scans were promising, but there were no guarantees. Tomorrow wasn't promised to anyone, but they had today, they had each other, and they had hope. And sometimes, hope is enough to work miracles. What do you think happens next for Maya, Alexander, and Emma? Do you believe love can truly heal a broken heart, literally and figuratively? Share this story if you believe in second chances, and subscribe for more tales that prove kindness and courage can triumph over any obstacle. Type love. If you believe in the power of family, forged by choice rather than blood, and let us know in the comments what you think they should name the baby. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the words, "What would you do for $1 million?" but end with the realization that love is the only currency that truly matters.